Just a reminder to our Speculating Wildly About Crime listeners, this is for entertainment purposes only and solely the thoughts and opinions of our team. We do invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to Speculating Wildly About Crime. My name is Carolina, and I will be your host for this episode. Today, we will be discussing the Lindsay Buziak case. Tonight in our SWAC Pack, we have Cindy, Dana, Missy, Janelle, and David. Hi, SWAC Pack.
Hi.
Hello.
Are we ready to discuss the case of Lindsay Buziak?
Ready.
Before I get into any of the facts about the case, I just want to put a couple of things out there. It happened in 2008, and it had coverage in a lot of media outlets, a lot of podcasts, a lot of YouTube videos about this case. Unfortunately, with this case, there has been a lot of misreporting, misinformation that has been out there over the years, which I think goes into just the ethics of reporting in true crime and talking about these cases. There are a lot of times throughout where I'm going to put some caveats on some facts because it's about people's perceptions of events that happened at the time, that maybe they had a different perception at the time than they do now. My sources for this case, I really relied heavily on Capital Daily, which is a news organization in Canada. Capital Daily actually, in the last few years, filed in court to get a lot of the records released in this case. They actually did a podcast as well called Murder on the Island. That is an 8 or 10-part series of all of their findings. So let's get into it. Lindsay was born on November 2nd, 1983 in Victoria, British Columbia. So that's in Canada, to parents Jeff and Evelyn. Lindsay had one sister named Sarah. They were very close growing up. Lindsay's parents actually split up in the mid-1990s. Her mom was awarded primary custody of Lindsay and her sister, and Lindsay's dad moved to Alberta, Canada. When Lindsay was about 18, she began dating a guy named Matt McDuff. In a Dateline episode, he does say that they had a stormy relationship. It ended around 2006. Lindsay decides that she wants to pursue a career as a real estate agent. And around this same time, she actually re-meets a man by the name of Jason Zalo. She had actually known Jason for quite some time. Jason's family was also heavily involved in the real estate business in Canada. His mom did a lot of real estate. Her name was Shirley Zalo. So when Lindsay and him started dating, it seemed like a perfect match. They had very similar interests, similar goals. They got together very quickly and ended up moving in together. There are some varying accounts of Jason and Lindsay's relationship. Lindsay's friend, Vicky Mackey, in an interview with Capital Daily, said that she wasn't super happy in the relationship and she was considering possibly leaving Jason. In December of 2007, Lindsay had visited her father, Jeff, in Calgary, and she told him that Jason didn't really have the same, quote, ambition as her. However, Lindsay's sister, Sarah, did say that Lindsay seemed very happy with Jason. He treated her very well. Evelyn, Lindsay's mother, did see that they had some issues, were fighting a little bit, but she said that leading into 2008, their relationship seemed to be doing a lot better. For what it's worth, Jason later on says that he didn't have any indication that they were in a bad place and he didn't think that she was going to break up with him at all.
And can I throw out there, Carolina, I feel like a lot of men after a divorce be like, what? She just divorced me out of nowhere. I had no idea. When that's probably maybe not the truth. So I could see it going either way, honestly.
She was setting the signs 10 years and he was like, I had no idea. I don't understand.
Wanted to piggyback off that. They're what, 20, 21 years old at this point?
Yeah, she was 24 and he was about the same age as her.
And so
Yeah.
sometimes relationships, there cannot be a connection, but it doesn't mean there has to be abuse or that it's awful. Sometimes there's just, you're going in different directions. This is you're very young. So just because someone is thinking about, is our dreams meshing and we're in the right direction, doesn't mean it has to be abusive and ugly. Do you mind if I ask, with that being said, one thing I wrote down is his lack of ambition because he was maybe riding the coattails of his parents, as where Lindsay felt like I'm not gonna ride coattails of nobody. I want to create my own empire versus riding off these coattails. Like, do you know if that was maybe a factor?
That's definitely possible. It's clear that Jason was involved in his mother's real estate business. Interestingly enough, Lindsay's father was also a real estate agent. So he did a lot of commercial real estate, and I think he still does. Lindsay actually, she started working for a real estate company. She worked for them for a little bit, but then she actually transitioned over to working for Remax, which is where Jason and his mother, Shirley, both worked, as well as Jason's brother.
I would imagine that adds to whether she was gonna end the relationship or not, because that's a sticky situation.
That's a good point, Janelle. I think if she was thinking about doing it and she's having these conversations with her friend and with her dad, she might not have had any conversations with him yet because she probably was thinking about the possible ramifications if she were to end the relationship when they're all working so closely together. Like a lot of our cases that we talk about, the timeline becomes very important. So I'm going to try really hard to put timestamps throughout just so we can keep track of where people are at what time, either in late January or even possibly on February 1st, 2008. Lindsay received a call from a woman who was interested in purchasing a home. The woman caller explained that her husband had been transferred for work from Vancouver to Victoria. They had very specific parameters for the home. So Lindsay wrote all of these down in like a day planner. She wrote it needed to be a 3-bed, 3-bath with a large master bedroom. It needed to have a separate area for a housekeeper. The buyers needed to purchase the home within 3 days, and they wanted it in the $1 million range. Lindsay later said to individuals that the woman on the phone had either a Spanish or a Mexican accent. She did write the phone number down on her notepad. She didn't write the name of the potential buyer, and Lindsay actually saved the woman in her phone as $1 million, and that's it. So obviously Lindsay wanted to know who made the referral to this woman. Now, this is where I'm going to have to throw a caveat on what was said. So according to documents that were obtained by Capital Daily, when Lindsay asked who had referred the woman, she had said that it was a friend of her husband's. The other version of this story actually comes from Lindsay's father, Jeff. In an interview that Jeff Buziak did with Crime Watch Daily, he said that Lindsay had told him that the caller said she was referred to Lindsay by one of Lindsay's former clients. Lindsay attempted to call that client after she got off the phone with this woman. It turns out that client was out of the country and couldn't answer the phone. So that's the version of events that Lindsay's father says. So because this deal needed to happen very quickly, Lindsay kind of spent the rest of the day looking for potential homes that would fit within the caller's parameters. So she settled on a few homes, including one in Gordon Head, which is a seaside neighborhood in the municipality of Saanich. And she set up a house showing for 5:30 p.m. on February 2nd, 2008. It was in a very new development that had just been built up. So there were a lot of really nice homes there. There were a few neighbors, but not everyone had moved in to the neighborhood yet, but it fit with what the buyers were looking for. There are definitely some differing stories about how this particular house was chosen. So it's a little unclear whether it was chosen by Lindsay or was chosen by the woman who called her and said, oh, this is the house I want to look at. However, the documents that were obtained by Capital Daily indicate that the police believe that Lindsay was the one that provided the address. It's been reported that Lindsay had multiple phone calls with this potential buyer, some lasting upwards of 10 to 20 minutes as they were discussing houses. It's even thought that Jason Zalo did have a brief conversation with the caller. According to the police records obtained by Capital Daily, the woman did call the house phone at one point at Jason and Lindsay's condo. And she asked for Lindsay. Jason had said, oh, she's out. I assume that they were fielding calls for each other on multiple occasions because they're both real estate agents.
Isn't it weird that this person would call the house, though? I understand if you want to keep this $1 million deal, but I just feel like it's really weird to give your house phone number out to somebody.
I can see you having an office, but there's also a lot of work from home stuff too. I could see you giving out your home phone.
This was, if I think back, this might have been before like everything was an unlimited plan.
That's
Oh.
true too.
So maybe you did utilize your house phone as like the first available.
Maybe they had a home office situation where they had a phone in their office. Maybe they had a separate personal landline as well. But Lindsay set up the house showing for February 2nd at 5:30. Lindsay did this despite having a bachelorette party to go to that evening in Vancouver. On February 1st, after Lindsay figured out all the house showings that she wanted to do, she ended up going out to dinner with Jason's mom, Shirley Zalo. At the dinner, Shirley offered to show the home on Lindsay's behalf. She said she did that because she knew that Lindsay had the bachelorette party. She knew she helped plan it and she didn't want her to have to be late for that. But Lindsay said, no, I want to do that. Lindsay gets home later that night. Jason gets home after her from playing hockey and hanging out with his buddies. But Jason actually at this time also offers to Lindsay to show the house on her behalf. He has his real estate license. He knew, oh, I can do this and she can go hang out with her girlfriends. That's what he tells later to Capital Daily as well. But again, she says to Jason, nope, I'm going to do this. I want to try to get this sale. I'm just going to go to the bachelorette party after. So Jason says that she doesn't seem worried, just more maybe inquisitive about why they chose her being a very young real estate agent, like why she was given that opportunity. Let's fast forward to February 2nd, 2008. This is the day that Lindsay has the house showing set up for the home in Gordon Head. Around 2 o'clock that day, and again, this is all coming out of the police records from the court filing that Capital Daily did to get some of these records released. So around 2 o'clock on February 2nd, Lindsay goes to the RE/MAX office headquarters. And at that time, according to individuals that were in the office, including a receptionist, Lindsay appeared freaked out. She was feeling very nervous about the house showing. She even asked that the receptionist search the caller's phone number in the database to see if there were any hits that this caller had potentially worked with any other real estate agent. No results came back, or at least that's what it seems like from the records that were obtained. There wasn't anything where that phone number was coming up. Overhearing this, one of Lindsay's coworkers, Cal Faber, who actually was a former police officer, came up to Lindsay and he offered to go with her to the house showing as protection. You feel worried about it, but let me just come. We can do the showing together. That will help quell some of your worries. He reports all of this back to Capital Daily as well. He's one of the people that was interviewed on the podcast. He definitely thinks that she was very worried about this, but Lindsay assured him at the time that nope, it's fine because Jason, her boyfriend, was going to go to the showing with her. Later that day, around 3 o'clock p.m., Lindsay met Jason for a late lunch before the house showing. In his interview with Capital Daily, Jason recounted how Lindsay was showing him the feature sheets for all the houses that she was showing. He said that she ate really quickly because she wanted to go back to the condo to change and get ready before she headed over to the house showing. Jason indicated that he again offered at the lunch to show the home on Lindsay's behalf, and again, she declined that offer. After they finish lunch, they part ways. Lindsay goes back to the condo to get changed, and Jason actually was going to head over to an auto body shop called SHC Autographs. One of Lindsay's real estate clients was actually purchasing a condo that was owned by somebody who worked at SHC Autographs. So Jason was going over to take over paperwork for them to sign so they could get that deal solidified. So in his interview with Capital Daily, which occurred over a decade after all of the events that take place on February 2nd of 2008, Jason indicated that Lindsay had called him while he was at the SHC Autographs, and she asked him to come to the showing. In this call, she did ask him, though, remain out of sight. I don't want you to interfere with the showing, but I want you to be there, basically. While he was at SHC Autographs, Jason also received a call from his friend Cohen Oatman. The two of them had plans to go play hockey while Lindsay went to the bachelorette party later. He gets a call from Cohen, and Cohen is like, can we get together? What's the plan? What are we doing? And Jason says, oh, I'm here getting this paperwork signed. I have to go over and check on Lindsay at the house showing, but then we can move on to our plans. So Cohen says, okay, I'll meet you at SHC Autographs and then we can leave together. So we just have one car. So Cohen goes to meet Jason there, hops in his car, and they head over to where the showing is. So this is where some of the timeline, I'm going to try to really nail it down when people are leaving, what time things are happening. We actually have a pretty clear idea due to phone records and other things that show exactly where people are at what time. And this is a lot thanks to Capital Daily getting all of these records released. It was about 5 o'clock p.m. that Jason received the call from Cohen. Lindsay arrives to the home that she was going to show the potential clients, and that was an address of 1702 D'Souza Place in Gordon Head. So she arrives there sometime before 5:30. While Lindsay is at the house, Jason ends up calling Lindsay for directions to the home. So he had tried to put it in his navigational system and it wasn't showing up because it was a new development. So she started to provide them, but she had to hang up because the couple had arrived. We have witnesses that see Lindsay meeting with the clients outside the home. Neighbors who were interviewed by the police said that they saw her shaking hands with two people. The man was described as tall and wearing a longer jacket. The woman was described as having shorter blonde hair, and she was wearing like a very colorful, fancy red and black dress. So the dress kind of really stood out to them. We can nail this down a little bit more because Lindsay, when you go to a house showing, now there's a keypad that you type the number in to get into the house. But back then there was like a box with a code you had to put in, and then there was a key inside the lockbox. So Lindsay accessed that lockbox at 5:29 p.m. So that's according to Sergeant Horsley, who was interviewed on Crime Watch Daily. Surveillance footage shows Jason and Cohen leaving the auto body shop just before 5:30 p.m. The auto body shop is about 18 minutes away from 1702 D'Souza Place. The auto body shop still exists, so I was able to look that up. It would take them about 18 minutes, give or take, especially because they needed directions. It was reported that Jason did attempt to make other phone calls, including to his brother, to try to figure out if he knew where this development was. Jason texts Lindsay at 5:38 p.m. and said that he's a couple of minutes away. This text, according to Crime Watch Daily, was never opened by Lindsay. Capital Daily puts Jason and Cohen arriving in the development around 5:45 p.m. With my Google Maps search, I feel like it could be even a little bit later if it's about 18 minutes away. But between 5:45 and let's say like 5:48, Jason and Cohen arrived. So the development was on a cul-de-sac. So what Jason does, because Lindsay had asked him to not make himself known at the showing, he goes around, looks at the house, and then turns back around and like parks a little bit away from the house. You could still see the house, but he's a little bit away. Now, Jason, at the time of all of this happening, told the police that he saw a man at the front door of the home when he was turning around. He's wearing like a long brown multicolored jacket, and then the man shuts the door. So Jason at the time told police he was thinking that maybe the house showing had just started. So he doesn't think too much of it. For what it's worth, in his interview over a decade later, he doesn't seem to recall seeing the man, but says, if I said it back then, it must be true. So, like I said, Jason goes and is just watching the house. Him and Cohen don't really see any movement inside the home as they're waiting there. So after a little bit, Jason texts Lindsay and says, "Are you okay?" And he receives no response to this text message. So Jason decides, okay, I'm going to move the car a little bit closer. Lindsay can see me. I'm right outside. If anyone's in the home, they're going to see me too. They sit there for another minute or so, and around 6:00 p.m., Jason and Cohen decide something seems off. So they go to the front door and it's locked. So Jason's alarm bells immediately are going up. So he rings the doorbell like upwards of 10 times, absolutely no response. He looks through the pane glass window that's on the side of the door, and he can see Lindsay's high heel shoes in the doorway on the floor, which makes sense. Usually when you go in to see a home, you would take your shoes off, but he only sees the one pair of shoes. So Jason starts to feel really worried that he has no way to get in the house. So at 6:05 p.m., Jason calls 911. And in the 911 call, he says, "Listen, my girlfriend is here. She's showing this house. I followed her to it. The door is now locked. And I followed her because she was, quote, scared." While Jason is on the phone with 911, his friend Cohen is going around the house. He's trying to see if there's a way in. Cohen ends up going to the back of the house and peering over the back fence and sees that like the French doors to the back patio are open. So with a way in, Jason hangs up with 911. Jason lifts Cohen over the fence, like hoists him over. Cohen goes through the backyard, in through the back door, and then comes to the front and unlocks the door for Jason. Jason says, "Okay, I'm gonna go check upstairs." Cohen's, "All right, I'm going to check downstairs." So Jason's calling Lindsay's name. Cohen's looking through the downstairs. Jason goes up, and before he even gets fully up the stairs, he sees Lindsay slumped against the wall in the master bedroom, and there is a pool of blood around her. So he immediately rushes over to her. He begins to give her CPR. This is really awful. But while he's giving her CPR, he reported that he could hear the air escaping from her lungs. Jason calls for Cohen. He comes upstairs, and a second 911 call is made by Cohen, and that call was made at 6:11 p.m. So at that point, it sounds like multiple units were dispatched to the house. some from the first 911 call and some from the second 911 call. According to the coroner's report, Lindsay's death was the result of, quote, multiple stab wounds. This is something that there's been a lot of different stories out there about. Some media outlets put a number on it and say that it was 40 to 50 stab wounds. Some say that her breasts were targeted. Some say that she was nearly decapitated. But what the coroner's report says is just that it was multiple stab wounds. Now, the police could actually have a pretty good idea of when this murder occurred. And that is because at 5:41 p.m., Lindsay's BlackBerry phone made a phone call. The police believe that this call was made during the time of the attack. It was actually to somebody that Lindsay hadn't spoken to in years. They didn't answer the phone, and it resulted in a very muffled voicemail that couldn't really be deciphered. Chris Horsley on Crime Watch Daily said that they believed at the time that she was attacked from behind. So what they think happened is they went up the stairs. Lindsay had her back turned as she was like, here's the master bedroom, and she was stabbed in the back. She had no defensive wounds at all. According to the documents, which are obtained by Capital Daily, bloody socked footprints were found on the stairs of the home. There were no signs of sexual assault, no robbery. Her phone wasn't taken, her purse wasn't taken. It literally just seemed like this was just a murder for no other reason than killing Lindsay.
There's no bloody footprints downstairs, but is there blood droplets? I'm assuming somebody would be covered
Yeah,
in
so
blood.
I agree with you on that. And I think it's possible that there is other blood throughout the home that just is either still redacted from those records or hasn't been made fully public.
And then we have to assume they left through the back doors, right? The French doors that were open. But was there like a gate on the fence that they could have left through?
So what I saw reported and what was speculated, I think by the police at the time, is if there was a hole in the fence or, yeah, like you said, like a gate.
And then what about their vehicle? How did they get there? How did they leave? Did they just take off walking? Because Jason would have seen them if they came out and got in their car.
So that is another interesting point about this case. So Lindsay's vehicle was in the driveway of the home, and that's what Jason and Cohen saw when they arrived. But it didn't appear immediately that there was a second vehicle anywhere. Take that what you will. They did leave on foot somehow. What I speculate and what I can think about is if there was like a neighborhood where they could just cut through some other yards and have a car parked on another street, that would be their getaway.
Either that, or unless this all took place between 5:29 and 6:05.
That's why like timeline, it's tight.
That's
It's
the
timeline.
window if we want to say that they drove there and drove away while parked at the house.
If Jason and Cohen arrived at the time that the records show and the time that Jason and Cohen say they arrived, I don't think there's any way that the people inside the home left out that front door. Had to be the back door.
And all they really had to do was have the car, let's just for the sake of argument say that it was parked out front. It just has to not be parked out front when they get there. Because I think about the Jamie Kloss case where the police drove right by the car that had Jamie in it, but they weren't thinking about what was happening. How often do you see a random car in your neighborhood that you're like, that's just a car driving by? I'm sure at this point they weren't thinking that she was being murdered or was dead upstairs.
But just to clarify, because from the time they parked until the time that they moved closer to the time that they approached the house, they had full view of the front of the house. So if somebody
Yes.
had exited and gotten into a car. But I also find it strange because I feel like that would have triggered Lindsay in a type of way if they, whatever, oh, we parked 2 streets over and walked. Like that's super sketchy to me. I'm gonna have a lot of
But
questions.
maybe they left the car a block away, but then took a taxi or something. So they were dropped off. And this is a new development, so I picture new developments in my area, especially in February, don't have like landscaping or anything like that. So was it like a decoration fence or was it like a chain link fence to keep people out of a construction zone?
Yeah, that's
Well,
true.
and-
I'm not sure what the fence looked like at the time.
I do want to say that it was 33 degrees that day. So
Cold.
it was cold, yeah. So I was thinking like maybe they said, oh, we want to see how walkable this community is. So we wanted to park a few streets over. But it's 33 degrees in February.
How close were the neighbors to this house?
They were pretty close.
That was a cul-de-sac, right?
It was.
So even if you showed up and you didn't actually have work, or you're like, oh, our cars were just right there, and it's just some random car you're pointing to.
But this is a new and upcoming community. So do we know that the houses on around in that cul-de-sac were they all maintained?
Right.
So I think we have some questions about what this home looked like in the neighborhood. So I'm sharing the picture of the house. This is 1702 D'Souza Place. You can see the front door where Jason and Cohen would have driven up to. This is interesting because there isn't a significant amount of like lawn front. Like the front
Right.
door is pretty close to the road, which is actually like a bricked road, not even a paved road. With Jason saying at the time that he could see the man out this front door, he probably had a pretty clear view. Now, I don't know exactly where Jason parked, but I'll just flip this around a little bit so we can see more of the development. But as you can see, the neighbors are pretty close.
Yeah.
I think it was one of the neighbors that was interviewed was one of the ones living across the street. So it might have even been in this home right here. That's directly across the street.
If you go like around the corner a little bit, like onto, what is it, like Tapestry Street or something like that, you can see the fence a little better. And
Oh,
it's like a solid, like wooden fence.
So one thing about as you're going back, look at the fences because that looks like a new fence on this
Mm.
house, where other houses look like they might still have the original fences.
And if you go back a click, that white car is pulled off on the kind of like side parking
Oh,
spot.
that is true. Yeah.
Mm.
Again, maybe I could think that if they parked like in that spot, Jason wouldn't realize maybe that was their car, and it maybe wouldn't raise suspicions for Lindsay because, oh, we just found that spot over there.
True.
Yeah.
Because that road also doesn't look wide enough really to have the car sitting there either. But you know what? If these guys were relocating, I'm still going with the taxi because they would have flown in or whatever. So they might not have driven in. Not that they can't rent the car, but
That would be interesting too, because then I don't know at this point whether that's ever been looked into. That's an interesting point that they could have been just parked right in this little alcove here, and Jason and Cohen probably wouldn't think anything of that.
Or they could have blamed, if there was just some other car there, they could have said that was their car when they were actually parked somewhere else. I think maybe Jenna
Yeah.
said that.
Jumping back into the timeline, Janelle, I think it was you that mentioned this timeline is super tight. So just to give everyone a refresher, so it's all at once. Lindsay opened the lockbox to get into the home at 5:29 p.m. They go into the home. The police believe that she was killed around 5:41 when her phone made that call. So we're talking 12 minutes that they were inside the home for all of this to occur. Jason and Cohen, we know for sure that the first 911 call was at 6:05. So shortly after the events occurred. It sounds like there were 2 units that were dispatched to the house, one from the first 911 call and one from the second 911 call. The police came in, they were obviously going to immediately search the home and search the surrounding area of the home. There was no sign of the couple that Lindsay had met with. They brought in police dogs pretty quickly and they sniffed out the area of the front of the home, through the back of the home. I did read that they couldn't really search the side of the home with the police dogs because they deemed that area too contaminated, because some of the first responders, when they arrived, went through that area. Police at the time had said that there was limited forensic evidence that was able to be provided from the home. Chris Horsley on Crime Watch Daily said that he knew that they had toured the bottom of the house. That triggered something because I'm like, how did you know that they went through the bottom of the house? So the reason that I can think of is maybe they found Lindsay's fingerprints throughout the bottom of the home, but I'm wondering if they have some unidentified fingerprints.
But
Now,
if we're thinking back to that 12 minutes, that's a really short time to see the whole downstairs, especially in $1 million home. Like if you're still trying to put on this facade of, I would really like to purchase this house. Like, why are you not looking at anything then? Why do you just immediately want to see upstairs?
And it makes me wonder too, because could it just be assumption that the bottom floor was toured mostly? But I would think in a lot of homes structured like this, when you think of how the buyer was like, I need 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, whatever, like the things that are predominant to them would probably be upstairs. So if that is going to be what influences the sell, then that may be what you are highlighting first of, let's go look at these things that you said were deal breakers.
So if she's assuming that they want their 3 bedrooms and they want their 3 bathrooms, to your point, David, let's just go straight up there. And you said the stairs were like right by the front door. So that would make sense to me.
Really smart way to sell a house, though. Really smart.
Okay, I'm gonna get my real estate license. I'm gonna find out. I could be really good at that. Let me write that down.
Though, that's a really good point. You sell them with something they love first.
But with them saying that they toured the whole first floor, I think that's a really interesting statement to make.
And I'd be curious to know what is on that main floor exactly, because I know like whenever I would go to showings, usually like every light in the house is on because they want it to be bright and stuff. So did they just flip some switches off and then they just assumed that they looked at the whole house?
Maybe even if it's just her fingerprints, like the real estate agent usually gets there first, maybe runs through it, wipes counters off. So that could be why her fingerprints are maybe found. And that's why I said, I wonder if it's more of an assumption that they toured this
I
bottom
think that sounds like
more than.
But she only opened the lockbox at 5:29.
Yeah, so that's the problem with that I don't think there's any evidence to say that she went to the home prior to showing it.
Carolina, so I just always assumed that she had gone to the house before. Do we not know that?
We don't know that. From everything that I have read, it does not seem like she went to the house first.
That seems really strange to me.
The only thing I can think of is because it had to happen so quickly that she didn't have the time to do it, especially going back to that phone call. If she got that phone call February 1st and then the showing was February 2nd, if that's the timeline, she wouldn't have had any time to go to the house.
It makes me wonder too, like you work for a company, because I know like my real estate agent, there were certain things I was very specific about. And so she came to this house first and was like, okay, all of this checks off, right? But if she's working for a bigger company that has multiple real estates, there's the whole buddy system, right? Like me and Missy work in the same office, and when Missy me like, someone is wanting in 3 days to buy $1 million home, and they're like, oh, I just did a tour in this home. This fits this criteria. Check it out. And so you already have that feel of maybe.
I would assume that would have come out. Like that person would have made a statement, been interviewed.
But I could also believe if this was like a new build and there weren't all fluffed up stuff and she knew that they wanted the bedrooms, she could have said, "Oh, you go upstairs. I'll catch up with you in a minute. Get yourself comfortable, see what you want." So maybe she came up later in that she gave him like 2 or 3 minutes to go upstairs and just take a peek while she turned lights on or whatever.
That's a really good point, Dana. This was something I was going to bring up a little bit later, but I think probably with this line of discussion, it's good to bring it up now. I saw and heard it reported in a couple of places that Shirley Zalo, Jason's mother, might have been the listing agent for this house. But I've seen different things. So that's another thing that I really want to caveat pretty hard about who the actual listing agent of the home was. Unfortunately, we don't know too much about what, if any, forensics were able to be obtained from the home. In the last few years, a new unit was set up to retest some of this evidence. So my hope is they have some level of forensic evidence that with new technology they can test and hopefully are testing, because if you think about it, a stabbing is a very close contact crime.
Was she
That's
attacked
fine.
from the front or the back?
So what I can gather, and this is really from the Crime Watch Daily interview with Sergeant Horsley, is that she was attacked from behind. So what they think happened is she went up the stairs first. The couple was behind her. She went in to go show them the master bedroom and the ensuite bathroom, and they stabbed her from behind. And I think part of the reason, I assume, is probably the location of the stab wounds and the fact that she had no defensive wounds.
So the wounds were actually, the entrance point was from the back.
That's my assumption from what I have read about it. And even in Jason's interview with Capital Daily, he makes a point to say that he saw a bunch of blood, but he didn't make a point to flip Lindsay over. So I think what he saw was like blood underneath her, and then immediately tried to give her the CPR. According to a forensic pathologist, one weapon was responsible for Lindsay's death. The police have never publicly said if a weapon was ever recovered. So with little to go on, the police tried to just see if they could figure out anything to identify these potential buyers. When they talked to the witnesses, and the one witness described the dress, they were like, "Oh, this is a great lead. We can follow up on this. It seems like a really unique red and black dress. Maybe if we identify the dress, could be from a designer, maybe we can identify where this dress came from." So they do follow up on that lead. And unfortunately, it turned out, even though the dress looked potentially fancy, it was a department store dress, and a million of them were made. So that was a dead end lead at the time. Jason and Cohen, who obviously were found on the scene with Lindsay, were immediately brought in for questioning. According to the reporting by Capital Daily and from the records that they obtained, Jason cooperated fully with the investigation. He voluntarily turned over all of his electronics, turned over Lindsay's electronics. He even took a polygraph test. There was no deception found in any of the questions. Jason was officially ruled out by the Sandwich Police Department in February of 2009. So that was 1 year after Lindsay's murder. Later on in the Crime Watch Daily episode, Sergeant Horsley said that the reason that they ruled him out was based on, quote, forensic evidence, timeline of communication, witness testimony, and video surveillance. The police came out and said also that Shirley Zalo, so Jason's mother, nor, quote, any member of the Zalo family is considered a suspect or a person of interest in this case. We started this case saying that Lindsay received a phone call from this potential buyer. So as part of their investigation, the police obviously took Lindsay's BlackBerry and they looked through her call log and they were able to identify the caller and the number. they figure out that the phone was unfortunately a burner phone that was purchased at a convenience store in Vancouver sometime in late 2007. So months before Lindsay's murder. The name that was attached to the phone was Paulo Rodriguez, which of course the police could not connect to any specific person, and they believe that it was a made-up name. They attempted to ask the convenience store for surveillance footage, but as we know with surveillance footage, we either usually get video that is grainy or they've deleted it. Now, in this case, there was no surveillance footage, but it may make a little bit more sense because it was months later. So that was unfortunately also a dead end for the police. The burner phone that called Lindsay was only ever used to contact her. Further, a second burner phone was used to check the messages on the first burner phone. The police have said that the burner phone was deactivated sometime after Lindsay's murder. The police, in their review of the case, also reviewed all of Lindsay's electronic devices. They did find that there was some data deleted from her computer sometime before she died. So it was, quote, data related to internet chat communications, which had recently been deleted. In a My Documents folder on the desktop, there was another folder called My Received Files, and there was contents within that folder that were also deleted. So the police, what I have read is they couldn't necessarily determine an exact time that the erasure occurred. According to the records obtained from Capital Daily, the police also filed multiple requests with the court to obtain deleted messages off Lindsay's Facebook account. Oddly enough, in the few weeks leading up to Lindsay's murder, there were a lot of Facebook wall messages that were deleted and things on her Facebook page that were deleted, which from what I read seemed very strange for Lindsay because she used her Facebook page as a marketing tool for her real estate business and was on it pretty frequently. The police are just hitting dead ends everywhere. Now, there's a lot of feelings by Lindsay's family as well as Jason about how this investigation progressed. Jason told Capital Daily that when he got brought in initially when this happened, that it took hours for them to even interview him and Cohen. He told Capital Daily that, quote, they botched the whole investigation in the first day. Lindsay's father has also expressed a lot of dissatisfaction with how everything went. He really thinks that there should be an arrest by now, and he does not think the police are doing a really excellent job when this hasn't been solved in over a decade. He has vowed to find out the people who are responsible. He has really dedicated his life to trying to figure out who did this. He holds an annual walk for Lindsay every year. They walk around the town in her remembrance and just reminding everybody that this is still unsolved. And my heart totally goes out to her family dealing with this. However, Jeff Buziak has seemingly been involved in really pointing the finger at Jason and Shirley as being potentially involved in Lindsay's murder. Allegedly, Jeff Buziak is involved in a website that is lindsaybuziakmurder.com, where it's like a message board. It has a lot of places where people can put articles and thoughts and all of that. And there's a lot on there claiming that Shirley and Jason are involved in Lindsay's murder. Now, This has been difficult on Shirley and Jason as well, and it actually has led to a lawsuit being filed by Shirley Zalo against Jeff Buziak, as well as 2 other people that were involved in this website for defamation. As of this recording, I don't know the outcome of any of that litigation. I don't know if she has kept that going or it's still an ongoing situation, but obviously the tensions with the family are extremely high. For what it's worth, Evelyn, Lindsay's mother, did tell Capital Daily that she does not believe that the Zalos are involved and that Jeff is not speaking on her behalf when he makes any of these statements. So with the Zalos ruled out by the police, do they have any other theories at all? They do. One has come out, which is pretty interesting and pretty intricate. The police have said that they really do believe that this was an orchestrated and pre-planned attack. And they base this on the burner phone being purchased, only used to contact Lindsay, that clearly she was the target. Or, as Sergeant Horsley said on Crime Watch Daily, a quote, scapegoat. A theory eventually emerged for the police. And to really understand this, we have to travel back to that December 15th, 2007 visit that Lindsay made to her father. According to Capital Daily, within a few weeks of Lindsay visiting her father in Calgary, there was a massive drug raid, which recovered 80 kilograms of cocaine worth $8 million. And it was described at the time as the largest ever cocaine bust that happened in that area. Really. Now, there's absolutely no official evidence that Lindsay had any connection to any drug use. There's no evidence that she used drugs. There's no evidence that she was selling drugs. So how does this connect to Lindsay? While she was visiting her father, she went to a Facebook page of either a person named Ericson Della Cazar or a relative of this individual. It was even reported on Crime Watch Daily that she attempted to contact this person. When the police reviewed her Facebook, they did notice that a lot of her Facebook friends were people that were involved in potentially the drug trade. So the police said they don't really know why she attempted to call this person, but either way, she contacted that person and then a drug raid happened shortly after. So the police said that after this drug raid happened, there was basically a quote witch hunt that occurred where people were literally being pulled out of their beds in the middle of the night, being like, who are you talking to? Who told? What's going on? Kind of thing. So one of the working theories by the police is that someone pointed the finger at Lindsay as being the informant that actually caused this drug raid to occur. What makes this theory a little bit more interesting is that Jeff Buziak has said that Lindsay told him that she saw something that she shouldn't have. Now, there's not an elaboration on what that means exactly, and definitely I've seen it reported that actually wasn't said, so that's another point I have to kind of caveat. But if that's true, it could play into this theory from the police.
When was the visit to Calgary?
So that was December 15th of 2007. So she was visiting her dad. I don't know how long she was there necessarily, but I think she was probably visiting him for Christmas.
So the phone had already been purchased, right?
Yes, the phone had already been purchased at that time, but what I read is that it wasn't activated until later.
And then when was the drug raid?
So the drug raid occurred in early January of 2008.
So did Jason or his family have any shady dealing or any criminal background?
Not that I could find any official record of. So at this point, I think that we are ready for speculations. Cindy, you are first.
I'm not sure where this couple came from as far as why they wanted to kill Lindsay, but maybe if she supposedly saw something she wasn't supposed to see, or did she go to a house to show it and walked in on something happening or something to that regard? Or was she the police informant for a big drug bust? Those would be where I would think some of why it would have happened, unless, again, it was somebody that was trying to get back at Jason or somehow related to them. But I figured that's why they called and made a very specific request for the type of house they wanted, because maybe in this market there was only one available, especially with such a short time for when they needed it. And if this place was still under construction, there may have been things like dumpsters or even houses that are just model houses where they could have stashed something, even a car in the driveway. Because I'm assuming these people aren't really looking for a house, obviously. And I thought maybe they even lived near that development, or at least were able to stay near that development. And so maybe they walked there and Lindsay didn't see anything wrong with that. And then could leave just on foot without having to worry about a car being. It also made me think, like, why would they have waited until she was upstairs to kill her? Was it just when she happened to have her back, or was there potential where obviously they met her in the front yard where people could see them, so maybe they didn't care who could see them, or they needed to show somebody who could see from an upstairs window that something was happening. Either she saw something she wasn't supposed to see, or it was part of somehow being a police informant, and somebody was trying to kill her to keep her quiet. I feel like it definitely was orchestrated, definitely was targeted for her.
All right, David, you are next up on my screen.
So I don't have a finger to point. So I'm going to start with least to greatest, right? I think that it makes sense to try to point fingers to Shirley and Jason, but I'm not sure what the motive would be. Like, they were not married, there's no insurance. However, with that being said, on the other side of that, I could see how there is the intimidation and trying to prove yourself on Lindsay's end of, no, I'm going to go, I'm going to show this $1 million home, I'm going to sell it. I could see how Shirley or Jason was like, I'll show it and take over because it's $1 million home, right? This is a big sell. They all work for the same company. They're all affiliated together. Like, we cannot pass up a sell. So I can see how those fingers are easily pointed, but I don't think that there's motive to murder her because of that. The second on my list is like the cartel. I can see it, but again, would she really hold enough stance to end something? Because this could be ignorance on my part, but I feel like the cartel knows how to investigate and know who is involved in things more honestly than the police do. And so are they going to go just kill this real estate agent that's in her 20s that doesn't have a lot of connection? And are they really going to do that when based on maybes and what ifs? Because I feel like their knowledge is probably a little bit more heightened than the people that we're supposed to trust. I did not realize that I knew this case until you got into it, because I'm bad with names. And I remember people wanting to say boyfriend Jason was outside, but he saw nothing but just a little bit of this. In his defense, I do not mean this as an insult, but it goes into the male privilege, right? Like, you are a man who probably isn't feeling threatened, that maybe your girlfriend does, and you're being the protective boyfriend that's sitting out in the car, but you're not really watching what's happening because you don't believe anything's going to happen. Like, it's that male privilege. So you're putting on your phone, your buddy messages you, and you're like, all right, I'm just going to drive down the street and hang out with him for a minute or whatever. I think that there's a lot of those things that play a factor that could point fingers, but I don't think it's enough to point fingers to murder. I guess the end of my speculation would be this is during the time that like Facebook was getting big, social media was getting big. There's things that were deleted before she had passed. So I wonder if there was a man who had contacted her to show homes, and maybe a female got jealous and set something up somehow to retaliate against her. And that is complete speculation. I feel like that plays more of a factor in the cause of death than any name that has been brought to us this far.
I want to go back just a little bit too. Everyone seems to have Jason cleared. That's why I didn't bring him up either. But I think it's awful funny that you text your girlfriend, she's showing a house. She probably shouldn't respond if she's being a good customer service person. And then she's in that huge house for 10 minutes and you're already panicking because she's not texting you back. So that part I thought was a little weird, a little convenient that why was that so quick? Obviously the crime happened quickly, but how would he know that, especially if he couldn't see what was going on?
And I always take those things with a grain of salt too, right? If you witness a crime or involved in something traumatic, you don't know if it's been 10 minutes or 10 hours, right? And like you try to think logic. And granted, there may be phone records or whatever that show that. When it comes to the polygraph test, and I would love your all's opinion on this, I think that we all have the same opinion on a polygraph, but I find that if you truly are innocent, the polygraph shows that. But if there's speculation that maybe you're not, the polygraph kind of shows that, or depending on how you're involved, right? This was completely clearing, if I'm understanding correct.
There was nothing that came out that said that Jason failed this at all, and they used that as part of his cooperation with the investigation to rule him out. I assume there was not any deception detected.
To me, the polygraphs are, you make it what you want. How many times have we heard that somebody failed a polygraph, but it was actually inconclusive? Or aside from like the sciencey stuff of it, of the psychological, which you know, but you say he was fully willing to do the polygraph, so clearly he's innocent. But you can be innocent and decline to do a polygraph, and you can be guilty and accept to do it. So everything surrounding a polygraph to me is you can make it whatever you
I feel like you need the context of what questions were asked.
Yeah.
Like how hard were these people going?
And I agree with that. And
I feel like that's the piece that we never talk about.
And I feel like there's so many that come back inconclusive, but I feel like with what limited research I've done on there, if it comes back completely clear, then usually we find that they have not been involved. But if it comes back inconclusive, then it's almost like that gray area of how close are you to it. And then if it comes back to failing, I guess the bottom line with that is I don't trust them at all, but I would trust a complete clearance with a polygraph more than I would inconclusive.
But it can be just as equally wrong. You can do false positive and false negatives, right?
All right, Cindy, I'll see myself out. Thank you.
Well, and I was going to mention this in my speculation, but I'll throw it out there now. When you think about the question, were you involved with her death? And he did not stab her. He was not in the house, but he's thinking, I sat outside for 20 minutes while she was inside dying. So I feel responsible for her death. And you would say, whatever that looks like, and it's either true, false, whatever that reads there, but
has it been a thing of if I would have just done this one thing differently, they would not have been in this place at that time and died. And so you have that personal guilt.
yeah, and not only was he sitting outside with his buddy for 20 minutes, why did I have to hang out with my friend? Why did I just not go straight to her? Why did I not just tell her, no, you're not going by yourself in the first place? So I think that can also play a factor in a polygraph.
That
And I,
goes back to what I had said, which I truly, in this case, mean respectively, because we only know what we know, right? We all have some sort of privilege. But it goes back to that male privilege. He's trained to think that this shit doesn't happen. They might not be able to afford this house. Maybe they said they could afford $1 million home and they couldn't, and they just want to tour the house. Like, I could see how that could be his train of thought versus my girlfriend is in danger.
or is he like, she told me absolutely not to go in there to help her with this sale because she wants to do it on her own. But that's why I'm still sitting outside though, because I'm still nervous. I don't know why they couldn't have just, for any of them, she could have just been like, yeah, he's helping me out. Because they wouldn't have known it was her boyfriend just hanging out with her. It's not like he didn't have real estate experience. So he could have went in easily and just been like, oh, I'm just helping her out today,
But I
showing
feel like
houses.
he would have it so much to prove. This is mama who's top, boyfriend who is able to slack a little bit because mama's top. So he's grandfathered into a certain level. And so I could see her being the kind of person that is, no, I'm doing this on my own. I'm going to
Yep.
make this $1 million sell. This is going to be what gives me a name in this industry. Do not.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's what's tough about this case. We have a lot of different perceptions of people from at the time and then what they're perceiving looking back at it, and exactly what Lindsay's state of mind was about any of this. And I think it makes a lot of sense, like what David was saying, to like jump on the back of that. I think she did want to prove she could do this in a way. I fully believe that she never expressed any concern or worry to Shirley about any of this, because that's her boyfriend's mom. It's somebody that's been in the real estate business for a lot of years. She would not want to seem weak or anything in front of her, to where I could also believe the day of the showing, she's going into the receptionist and saying, I'm really freaked out. To her peers, she's saying something maybe different than what she's saying to her boyfriend's mother at the time. Or even her boyfriend. She might have wanted to have the front with him as well.
So I don't think that I said this, which shame on me because it was one of my big points that I even have stars by. But it makes me wonder, like, who she had previously sold houses before, because social media was becoming a big thing. I have a lot of real estate friends, and they all post pictures of the person in front when Cody and I bought our house. There was a picture of me and Cody with a sold sign in front of our house. Could that have played a factor into someone getting her contact information and contacting her based on their relation to the buyer?
Damn it, David, you took my point.
Oh, damn it, David.
I'll go to you next, Dana, because you're actually next on my screen anyway for speculation. So
Okay.
you can flush out that point.
That was pretty much what I was going to say, because you said that she used her Facebook for marketing. So the fact that she was deleting stuff was odd. And I had the same thought of, my realtor took a picture of me in front of my house and said, congratulations. Regardless if she said, oh, it's my husband's friend, or if she actually picked somebody that's, oh, these people look like somebody I can say referred me. But one of the other things, and I don't know why, but it sticks out to me, is the $1 million price tag. And I'm wondering if it wasn't like 750,000, 800,000. There's a lot of other numbers. Want to go to, like, they wanted to make sure it was so big that she couldn't refuse it. And 10 calls within, what, 48 hours max? That's a pain in the butt client. That's a lot of time that you're talking, 10-minute calls is a lot. So I'm sure they're even thinking, we can bug her, we can poke her, and she's not going to walk away. We've got her. But the other thought was, like, in my mind, new build houses have like white carpets for some reason, and it's like very clean and pristine. For some reason, I had the thought, what if they also just had the thing of, let's mess up this like really expensive house while we're at it? But it's a new build home. They don't have to worry about the homeowners coming home in the middle of this. If they're upstairs, they saw her shoes, but you can't see her in a pool of blood from the outside. Who would find her? Not until the boyfriend would be like, guys, she still isn't home from that showing. Boy, we should probably call some, which would have been even a longer time. When I want to go back to Facebook, they said like she had a lot of drug dealers or drug trade people on her Facebook. But in my mind, they could have a lot of disposable income and want to buy property or houses, like money laundering purposes, like either or, I guess. So to me, I'm like, man, whatever. And when they say drug trade, is it that kid from high school that was a weed dealer? Who knows? And I also have down that the guy was wearing a long coat and she was wearing a red and black dress. Both are great to hide blood. Dark colors don't necessarily show up as easy. And if they have clothes under, they could also take their jackets off quick or change into another dress underneath. So that was another kind of thought process that I had. And in conjunction with looking fancy, like you can buy this $1 million house. So those were just a kind of like the general thoughts that I had. And also it was 33 degrees in February. I know, at least for me where I live, 33 degrees in November and 33 degrees in February are two different temperatures, what they feel like. A long, heavy wool coat maybe would have been easy to rationalize why he wasn't wearing one when it was actually covered in blood. All that to say, I don't know exactly who or why. I do feel like it was obviously targeted and planned. For what reason, I don't know. If it's just sick people. We haven't talked about like the Ken and Barbie murders yet, but they had no reason.
Damn it, Dana.
That
So
is my, I'm gonna say favorite, but like Canadian cases, Ken and Barbie.
so even though it's hard to rationalize that maybe they just wanted to do it, but maybe they just wanted to do it and they just found somebody. I also just wanted to throw this in there while I have the floor. But when I was buying my house, it was me and my mom that were looking at houses. And I had a female realtor. And at one point, we asked her, like, oh, like it must be nice showing houses to two women. That's got to be reassuring or whatever. And she was pretty much yes and no. And we were like shocked by that response because she's like, yeah, at first you're still apprehensive, but I think she showed us like 13 houses. So by the end, she was obviously comfortable with us. But you never know what you're walking into. There could be some psychopath hiding in the closet wanting to do God knows what. So I just think that's like another element of that. That's why the woman was making the phone calls and contacting her, is to add that element of safety. Oh, it's just me. It's another woman. I think we've all done that. It's another woman. She's probably fine. So I lean more towards they were from Victoria, so they didn't have to really go anywhere. And it was random, unfortunately.
Missy, what is your speculation?
Oh boy. I'm going to start by just saying, damn it, Carolina. First of all, with what Dana just said, with being the realtor must be terrifying in a way. And my brother actually a few years ago became a realtor. And I was like, this was like the first thing that I thought, I think I have a problem, you guys. This was the first thing I thought of when he said he became a realtor. Instead of saying, congratulations, I was like, ooh, be careful. So bad. But
that's like everybody telling Cindy to be careful in Aruba, though.
Yes.
Well, yeah. Sorry, Cindy. It's gonna
Look,
after the last one, we got to tell you that now. So yeah, that's got to be a little scary. And also, just this case, I've known it for a while, but I've always sat on there like it could have definitely been strangers. It could have definitely been somebody who was doing something nefarious on purpose. But no, but for real, like I could see that being something. I had a couple of thoughts just because obviously, and I think we're probably all on this same island, that this was definitely planned. This was planned in advance. She was definitely the target of this. They said the $1 million price tag for sure to get her there on purpose. 100%. This was all her. So even if it was like some strangers, like they picked her on purpose. And then we'll go past strangers and go to maybe she did see something that she wasn't supposed to see. We all assume drugs, but maybe it wasn't drugs. Maybe who knows if Jason's family were involved in things that might have been illegal. And maybe they had something to do with it. But I think that the people that did it were probably hired to do it. This looks like more of a hit because it's so planned. But why would you do it with a knife? That feels like that's overkill and personal. If you were just there to kill somebody, like a hit wise, why would you stab somebody that many times? And that bothers me. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm very confused. I did write notes. The only notes I wrote were two. One says intuition. And for me, I feel like she had a feeling something was wrong with this deal. I do think that she was like freaked out about it. And I think that's why she asked Jason to come and meet her. I think she just knew. And for our listeners and our watchers, just a reminder, follow that because those things are usually true, right? But I think she did know something was up. It didn't feel right. But she was led because of that money, that $1 million. That's what got her there. And then the other thing I wrote was Jason and alibi. This was just when you were talking about them in the car when he was going to that place and get the paperwork signed. And he was supposed to meet his friend and him were going to go do something. It just felt an alibi. Oh, I'm over here doing this. And now I have this person with me to tell or to say that I was doing this. So if he had hired somebody to kill her for some whatever reason, if it wasn't because she knew something, I don't know why else. I'm with David, like, what's the motive here? And then it seems like it took a long time for him to get there, or and then we're waiting. And
then you go in so quickly.
Yeah, like that's.
And how often do we hear about if like somebody were to commit a murder, they want to have somebody with them when they find the body?
Mm-hmm. And just all of those things seemed really sketchy to me. And like some of the stuff that he had said, again, we're only hearing that from him. Because there's nobody else to, she said this to me. Like he said that, she said that, but we don't know she actually said that. So there are some things where it's like, he said that he got here at a certain time, but that's what he said. There's no proof that he got there at that certain time. It's hard. I don't know. I do know that this definitely was an attack on her for whatever reason. And unfortunately, 24, so young. But that's what I got, Carolina.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of good points. And I think that's like about this case, there's just so much mystery with it, with all of the different facts and how slowly some of them came out, as well as just the perceptions of everybody involved. And we're hearing it. This is what Lindsay said at the time. We don't know if any of those things are completely accurate or if the perception of the reporter of that information has the correct perception years down the line or even in that moment. Because I could see you had this conversation, Lindsay's then dead. Does that change the perception of the conversation you had with her? Does it seem heightened in your mind then? I just think there's so many ins and outs with it. Janelle, what do you?
I think this is the first time where I'm pissed that I'm last because I think everybody stole a little bit of what I was going to say, saying that she said that she saw something she shouldn't. I don't think that's a question where you don't ask follow-up questions. And so the fact that he is so adamant about Jason and Shirley makes me wonder, did she maybe tell him more about that statement? Until he comes out and expands on this, we'll never know, but that definitely stuck out to me. Like everybody else, I think it was absolutely planned with phone and this super tight timeline of when all this had to happen. It wasn't like a disagreement happened. It was like, we got to get this done. The whole thing about Jason, I too think it very strange that he got so concerned after what she had been in there for 35 minutes. I don't think that's an insane amount of time to tour $1 million home. Like, I'd be in there for 6 hours. And for him to call 911 at 6:05, that's crazy to me. But if it was just his gut, if it was intuition, I will chalk that up and give that its due. But if I had something to do with it, I probably would not have called 911 that quickly. Also, I probably would have been the one to hop the fence and then go make sure that she was unalive and then let my friend in. And so I want to clear him. Like, I don't, but I have no strong evidence for him. His actions are strange, but maybe he just had that weird gut feeling to me. And I did write down Ken and Barbie killers just based on the quickness of how it happened. This was so motivated. It was almost like they just, or he or she, we don't even know, but somebody wanted to kill somebody because it happened so fast. And I definitely thought about that. But then also, like, a hit ordered by who? I don't know. But it all boils down to it was something that was already planned out long before this day. Like, from the phone call to the meeting, like, this was already a foregone conclusion, like what was going to happen. And then my crazy channeling Jamie situation is, I don't know how developed this area was, but what if somebody wanted to sabotage the development?
Jamie would be so proud right now to know.
What if somebody
was
just
gonna say,
wanted to put
very
a
interesting.
stain on that cul-de-sac?
That is something that I never thought about. And oddly enough, not oddly enough, but playing into what you just said, this house took, I think, over a year to sell and went for significantly lower than the original listing price. So that could play into kind of what your thought is with that.
It's wild. It's very not on brand for me.
Can't wait till Jamie hears this.
Damn it. Don't tell her. Don't let her watch this.
I love where you put it out and send it to her in text.
Okay, Carolina, what you got?
I do think for sure this was a targeted attack. There was a burner phone that was used. It was only ever used to contact Lindsay. It was not used for any other purpose. I agree with what everyone was saying about it being $1 million listing, the multiple phone calls. They really made it to be an offer that she couldn't refuse. Like, they needed her to be there at that time. This needed to work out. So I think that whoever did this, it was Lindsay that they wanted to kill. I don't think, from what we know now and from Capital Daily getting the records, that Jason is involved. I think that the timeline is super tight. If Jason arrived with the estimation, if everything is accurate that's been reported, which, like, have to assume it is because there's surveillance footage of him leaving the auto shop that is about 18 minutes from the home. If that's all correct, which I think that is, that would put him at the house probably the earliest 5:45. If the timeline is correct, the police think that the call from her BlackBerry phone was made at 5:41 and that was the time of the murder. Jason wasn't even there at the time of the murder. So I think we all agreed to the fact that he wasn't the one that actually stabbed her, because he was found at the scene. He called 911. He wasn't found with blood on him. He had Cohen with him. A whole bunch of factors that would make that not plausible. But I also don't think that he hired anyone to do this, because he voluntarily gave over his electronics. He gave over everything. They searched the condo. I feel like they would have found some level of evidence, some money trail of him hiring somebody. I would assume that the police would have flagged that, though, especially because they did bring on eventually in a whole new unit. The FBI was involved. I think that they would have flagged something like that that could have pointed to maybe a money trail for Jason. So I just think that there's just not any evidence. pointing to him. I also struggle, like David said, with the motive. What would be his motive for this? They weren't married. It wasn't like there was the concern that she was going to take all of his money or anything like that. The drug cartel theory that the police came up with, although it seems really out there, I could follow that road. I really wish we knew when the Facebook messages and the things on her computer were deleted, because I'm wondering, the police's theory is that she contacted either the person that was arrested or a relative of the person that was arrested on her Facebook. Either hang out, talk to them on the phone. If she got wind somehow that they were involved in some level of drug trade, what if it was her trying to delete any evidence from her Facebook that she had any contact with these people, being fearful that, oh, I could get caught up in something that I really don't want to get caught up in? And I think somebody said about the drug cartel having means to figure out who the rat is in the organization. I'm wondering whether maybe the person even that Lindsay was talking to was the rat and tried to just point the finger at her to get any type of heat off of them. And if there was a drug cartel involved, they just went with it because either they're going to get rid of the rat talking to the police, because I think what I forgot to mention is the police did say that the drug cartel knew somebody talked to somebody to get this raid to happen. They knew somebody tipped somebody off. So they were looking for the rat. So if there was a rat that said, oh, no, it was Lindsay. I told Lindsay things, she must be talking. So they targeted her. So they're either getting rid of the rat or they're making an example of somebody that they think is the rat. That none of you better talk. What's done is done, but now none of you better talk because look what happens. You are going to get murdered. And that's just the end of the day. That Lindsay may unfortunately have just been targeted incorrectly as being involved, because I do think that there is no evidence whatsoever that Lindsay herself was involved in the drug trade or in drug use at all. I think it had to be some level of peripheral contact that she had that could have eventually made her the target. It could really have been that she just got caught up in something and got blamed for something that she didn't do, and she unfortunately lost her life over it. This case remains unsolved a decade later. It is still an open and active investigation in Canada. If anybody has any information about this case, you can call the information line for the Saanich Police Department at 250-475-4356, or you can call toll free at 1-888-980-1919. I think there is a lot of hope that this case could be solved. I think it's one that should be solved, and I'm wondering whether the police may have an idea of who did it, but just can't prove it at this point. Really, if you have any information about this, we encourage you to call the numbers. We will also include those in our show notes for the episode. But for now, all we can do is speculate wildly.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our show today. We genuinely appreciate any and all support. We would love if you would please subscribe, like, comment, or download on any of your favorite platforms that you go to for podcasts. Did today's episode leave you with more to say, or have a theory that we didn't discuss, or even a case that you'd love to hear us talk about? Head on over to our Facebook discussion group. You can search SWAC Pod, SWACPOD discussion group, and leave any suggestions, comments, etc. there. To feel a little bit more comfortable via email, we can also be reached at swacpod@gmail.com. That's SWACPOD@gmail.com. Any and all feedback is incredibly helpful to us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep speculating wildly.